Welcome to Property Smart HDB Episode 1. Hi, this is Kelvin from PROPNEX. I'll be sharing with you from this Episode 1 on HDB Resale Index on the behavior and performance. For this series of Episode 1, I will draw back from 2010 to 2022 Quarter 3 on the price index performance. The reason why I took from 2010 is because it experienced a similar price hike as compared to lately in 2022. For the price index monitoring, HDB actually tracks doing it in a quarterly format. Alright, it's based on HDB resale application received from the seller and buyers, which means that once the agents or the seller or buyer themselves submitted the resale applications and HDB acknowledged it, and that's where the index starts to track in. So now you've noticed that in 2010 to 2013, there was a price hike of pretty high. In fact, if you look at it, it was like over 30 points for a period of almost like 2 years. It's experienced similar price hike as in just lately in 2020 towards 2022 Quarter 3. So, but what is the reason for the initial part? I'll put it as the segment 1 in 2010. What's the reason the price hike? And let's zoom in further. What actually triggers that? Now, there are three major contribution factors that actually contributed the price hike during the 2010 segment. First of all, it's the SPR influx of buyers coming into the resale market. Because there's no restriction for SPR buyers at that period of time, so they'll just come in rather than getting themselves on the rental units. Must as well buy a units which makes more sense. Secondly, it's about the COV effect. Many sellers will have experienced, if you have sold a unit during that period, that you need to conduct a valuation reports before you actually sell your house. So what happened is that once you have the valuation reports, you would start to determine your house renovation, how much cash you have put into a unit, and start to do comparison with your neighbor's unit that have just been sold. So inevitably, the price of the next house that is put on sales will get higher and higher because of the valuation plus the COV effect. Next, it's because of the BTO flats couldn't meet the demand from the buyers requesting for the new flats. So these all three effects have resulted in the price hike for the HDB during the 2010 to 2013 period. So what happened next? At the point of the high at 2013, sometimes in the Quarter 2, when the price hike went up to 149.4 in 2013 Quarter 2, HDB decided that it's time that they have to ramp up the supply and also to start implementing some new policies in the market to cool it down. All in all, there are 7 interventing policies that came out. All right, so let's take a deep dive into it and see what happened. If you look at the supply of BTO flats, as in 2011 to 2014, BTO flats ramp up a supply of 25,000 almost every year. This is to help to manage the demand of the BTO flats. This supply of BTO flats did not really cool down the markets that as expected. HDB came out 7 interventing policies that really works so hard that they pushed down the index. So let's take a look at one by one. What are the policies that came out from HDB? It starts off with the 13th of January, the very first impact of ABSD being imposed to SPR buying. But for the very first time, SPR got to pay ABSD. This is something new to them. Subsequently, within less than the period of 2 weeks, SPR was given a further bomb that they cannot rent out the whole units, which initially there wasn't such regulation, and they got to dispose of the HDB resale unit in case these SPR buyers were to invest in any prior properties. Moving on, it was the restriction of CPF usage on older flats. Older flats which have a lease of 40 years and above face restriction on the CPF usage. This further dampens the HDB resale market. And on the 27th of August 2013, SPR came further bomb that they got to wait for 3 years upon getting their SPR status, so that they cannot commit a HDB resale unit upon having the status being converted as a SPR. This has really created a huge impact during the period in 2013. HDB also tightened up the HDB loan eligibility, which means the HDB loans that give to qualified buyers. It used to be at given the age maximum of 30 years, but they reduced it to 25 years, and there was this thing called MSR. It's a borrowing ratio that HDB works according to the salary of the buyer. It used to be based on 40%, but they reduced to 30%. So this further restrict tightening the loan eligibility of buyers coming into the HDB resale market. Now the final punch came probably about 6 months later. That was in 2014. For a long time, when the sellers need to do HDB valuation before selling, this was removed away. So HDB sellers and buyers, how do they commit a price when they want to buy a property? It's really based on recent transacted price. So the effect of COV is not known. Buyers got to commit a unit and then conduct a value. Then they will eventually know whether is there any COV involved. Prior to that, it was actually before you need to have a valuation reports and you pay according to the COV that the buyer deemed is alright. Alright, so these all of changes have created a huge impact into the market index. So what's next with all these policies and the ramp up in BTO supply? The HDB index drops. In fact, for a period of barely 2 years, the index dropped by almost 14.8 points, which is quite huge. You notice that the HDB index cannot drop even further for a very sudden period. It's a very basic reason, because how about owners, buyers who have bought during in 2011, 12, 13, or even 14, when the price was not high? If they're going to push the price index down all the way, these buyers who have committed during this period will suffer. Next, I give you another scenario based on my experience that I know. Many sellers committed a BTO resale flats during the period of 2011 to 14 for a very simple reason. Because at the height of 2011 to 2013-14 period, they have calculated their HDB resale flats. It was a very good price. And that's why they make some changes to the plan in family and decided to move on with a BTO flats, which makes sense for them because the price high in their resale flats, less of the BTO price, make some money from the sales proceeds, and they can probably enjoy their retirements or maybe for some children's education. But things change because the price index drop. This owner may feel the impact of the HDB price drop that causes the price to reduce, and that inevitably means the cash proceed reduce. This causes some fear to many owners who have already committed a BTO flats, waiting to get the key collections, sometimes in 2014 to 2017. And that's explained why HDB cannot implement too many policies so that it dampens further in their HDB price index. This was cause fear into these two groups, sectors of buyers. Moving further, with this price index moving at a stabilizing effect, HDB decided that, hey, that's good enough. All right, let's move on with some cooling measures. All right, so during this period, what happened? They eased off the BTO supply, and they came up with 6 different easing policies just to stabilize and cool the market. All right, so times way back in 2015 to as recent as 2021, the BTO supplies actually came down to about averagely 15,000 to 18,000 units every year. So with this easing in BTO supply, it actually helps to smoothen down, stabilizing the HDB resale pricing. The cooling measures implemented by HDB, 6 of them all in all, has actually further cooled down the market so that they can encourage resale buyers coming back to the market. Right. So starting off with income ceilings, they have increased. The income ceilings used to be $10,000. It raised to $12,000 so that more qualified buyers can enjoy a better HDB loan and also to qualify the grants eligibility. And also for buying in EC, they raised the income from $12,000 to $14,000. Next, the CPF housing grant for family used to be $30,000. They increased it to $50,000 or $40,000. subject to whether you're buying a 5 rooms, executive flats, or buying a 4 room, 3 room, or 2 rooms. So this inevitably causes some interest in buying a resale flat from the buyers. Next, they also have increased the proximity housing grant. This is a further enhancement to the stay near parents or stay with parents housing grant. So with this enhancement, more families are getting closer together and to enjoy these better grants offered. It used to be also for this grant eligibility, you have to fulfill a 2 kilometers wide radius. They're taking it off the way and they increase it to 4 kilometers wide. This actually helps in promoting more families to stay close or stay together. Further to that, they have also managed the CPF usage. So HDB makes some changes to the restriction in CPF policies. If you can recall, in July 2013, they make restrictions of those HDB units that is 40 years lease and above. This has been replaced sometimes in May 2019. The policy helps for those units that is 40 years lease and above. It was really a briefer. Buyers that comes by, so long as you can meet this number 95, which means the lease balance of the property plus the age of the youngest buyer. If it sums up and if it's more than 95, buyers are good to go with using their full CPF and maximize the loan eligibility from HDB. This further is buyers' eligibility coming into the market to buy a wider spectrum of HDB resale flats. Finally, the enhanced housing grants came into action and also of the income ceilings further revised. If you can recall, earlier I mentioned about the ceilings height has been changed from 10,000 to 12,000. This further enhanced from $12,000 to $14,000 for eligible buyers who are intending to get a BTO flats or going for HDB loans or qualifying for HDB grants eligibility. This really puts in a lot of welcomes to the resale market. I come back to the enhanced housing grant. It is a combination of additional housing grant plus special housing grant. It makes it less complicated with these two housing grants merged together, and it came up with a new grant called enhanced housing grant. And in fact, during this period, HDB was offering, if there's a grant eligibility of these three add up together, the total amount of $160,000 was available if a buyer qualifies to buy a HDB resale flat. This is really a very big, substantial amount. With this easing of BTO flats and the 6 easing policies, let's take a look at the index performance. The HDB index actually fell further over a period of about 15 quarters in a range of about 3.8 points. And HDB points has been moving around 130 plus minus, which is quite stabilizing. There came, finally, this period of time when every one of us will definitely not forget. It's in 2020 April. I still can remember when the PM announced about this lockdown. Many of us rushed to the supermarkets to stock up our groceries and day-to-day usage items. It was a crazy mess. First of all, working from home. For a long while, many adults probably may not have come across this in mind, working from home, unless you are working for online business or you are on your own business. Next, you also have experience about children, students from primary schools all the way to tertiary school. They had to, for a long time, to stay in home learning. This really created a lot of stress within the family. Next, we also have a BTO delay supply that faces as a new challenge during the COVID period. If you can recall, during the construction site, there was a lot of restricting the number of headcounts of construction workers going to the site, or delay in material supply and things like this. This eventually caused the delay in BTO supply for more than about 4 to 5 years. Because BTO flats used to be about 3 years to 4 years in delivery, it had to increase to 4 to 5 years. Finally, we also experienced the cost increase. As recent as this year, cost increase is the new norm again for this period. Because of all these new challenges, speed and space hungry buyers have to turn to resale market for changes to what their constraints, the new challenges that they face at home. So This inevitably causes the price hike as people are chasing for resale flats, and especially for those bigger units. So with all these changes and these new challenges, a new price index actually surfaced. And if you look at it, it was almost similar to the first segment that I mentioned way back in 2010. The price hike was over 30 points in less than 10 quarters. But the next new norm to many buyers will be the $1 million property. Just for the first 9 months of this year, there are a total of 277 $1 million property that has been transacted. This is even higher than the whole of last year, 2021, which is only 259. So all these new challenges, new norm surfaced during this COVID period. So let's take a recall. With all these new challenge, new high, new norms that we have experienced over these 2022, 2021, 2022 COVID periods. Right? Do a recap. If you can see the first segment of 2010, the price hike of 30 points index is almost similar to the recent 2020 to 2022's price hike. Right? Will this history repeat? Let's take a deeper dive look on it. With these new challenges, new price, new norms, HDB came to give us further price interventions. So let's take a look back at what happened over the past 12 years. If you can recall earlier, I mentioned about the price index hike during the 2010 segment. It was almost so similar to right now in 2020 to 2022. If you can recall back, though, for those who are probably old enough, way back in 2010 and below, that means in 2028, 2029, the average resale transactions was hovering around 28,000 to 30,000. So when you came down with easing supply of BTO flats that meet the demands, the price index actually took some adjustments to around 24,000, 25,000 as a new norm. That was hovering throughout the whole periods until lately. You notice during the cooling periods measure, sometimes in 2013, 14, 15 series, the resale volume transactions actually took a dive to 10 over thousands. And slowly when the easing policy came back, it goes back to the norm 22,000, 23, 24,000. Until lately, in 2021, there was a sudden hike in terms of volume transactions of 30 over thousands. And in 2022, because it have not ended the year yet, I'm taking the transactions volume from Q1 to Q3. It's already hovering above 21,000. It should end the year with around close to 28,000 to 39,000. So it experienced a new norm again in transaction volume other than the price hike in the new norms that we face nowadays. So looking ahead, what will happen? Will HDB give more interventions so that the price can be well controlled within the means of most Singaporeans? Well, let's take a look further. In fact, last year, a new models of BTO flats called the PLH, Prime Location Housing, was introduced for the very first time. Now, the difference of PLH is from BTO is really the 10 years MOP periods. Buyers of PLH have to observe a 10-year period of MOP, which means they have to stay in for the next 10 years before they can have the next plans of whether to sell or to buy a prior property, as compared to a BTO flats, which the MOP is only 5 years. So this makes a huge impact for this new model of 10 years MOP. Further to that, there's some tightening restrictions. Owners of these PLH units is not allowed to rent out the whole unit, even when the MOP is met. But they can rent out the rooms, no issue. So this is the entry-level restriction. How about owners who have met the 10 years MOP and decided to sell to the resale market? As compared to a BTO flats, MOP owners of PLH units need to sell back to only families which have a SC family, Singapore citizens family, in the units, which means SPR families are not allowed to buy a PLH. Further to that, singles who have interest in PLH is also forbidden to buy at this point of time because the policy for resale PLH restrict this to happen. So next thing finally is that Private property owners who have plans to buy a PLH, they are not allowed to do so also. They have to dispose of their private property, sit out for 30 months before they can commit into a PLH unit. And best of all, the income ceilings for all these resale buyers buying into PLH have to be based on the prevailing rate, which is at this moment $14,000. So there's kind of restriction for entry buying and also for resale for the seller who wanted to exit from the PLH upon MOP. So this model of PLH was introduced last year, sometimes in October. Next, they have also introduced last year, December 2021, a further tightening of the loan to value. Means qualified buyers who have HDB loans need to down pay a further 5% extra, be it in CPF or cash. Further to that, HDB start to ramp up the BTO flats again, starting from 2022 to 2023. Just as recent as 30th of September 2022, two policies came out further to cool the market. HDB further tightens as late as 30th of September 2022. Two new policies that came to cool the market. First is the loan to value. They further tightened it from 85% to 80%, which means buyer got to further down pay a 5% extra. And the final one was for private property owners who have just sold their private properties. They are not allowed to buy into a HDB resale immediately. They got to sit out for 15 months. The exceptional case is for buyers who are 55 years old. So they have to buy, husband and wife, upon selling their prior properties. They need to buy a HDB, no issue, if you are 55 years and above. Right? But there is some restriction on the size that they can commit. Basically, for downgraders, they can only buy a 4-room or 3-room or maybe a 2-room flexi from the HDB resale market. This helps to tighten a bit further, probably tightening towards the $1 million housing price tag. So looking further, will there be more interventions coming to hike the price? Actually, it's very obvious. Looking at the past history, HDB has done it during the 2010 to 2013 period. So what will trigger the HDB to come back again, whether to give further price hike or things like this? Well, it all depends on the performance again in the Q4 this year and also looking further into Q1 in 2023. But if you were to ask me, I would just mention as a point of time as a seller, when is the best time to sell, or as a point of time for buyer, when is the best time to buy? Now, there's always never the best time or the good time to sell or buy. It's always about the needs and affordability. If there's a need for the seller to sell because of a change in locations, or maybe because of some family restructuring that you require some changes, then there's a need and you need to go through it. For buyers, it's again buying within your financial means. Do not overstretch. Do not overcommit in terms of financial, because we are committing a HDB resale flats. Minimally, you're going to stay there for the next 5 years. Thank you for joining me at PropertySMART HDB episode 1. Do like and subscribe to our channels. Stay tuned for our next episode soon. You can also visit my personal page in Facebook. Just check on #HDBSmarts. Thank you so much. This is Kelvin Chai.